Hello, and welcome back to Top Scares with Mr. Biggs. Today, we have 4 stories from Northern California. These stories will surely make you think twice about going camping there. Story number 1. This first story is about 4 friends who decided to go camping in a remote part of the woods in Northern California. After a short drive and a short hike, they arrived at the campsite in the late afternoon and spent the evening setting up camp, enjoying dinner and a few drinks around the campfire. After a few more drinks, they started telling scary stories. After a while, they began to hear strange noises coming from the woods, which they wrote off as a curious animal. The group became increasingly uneasy from the sounds and, of course, the stories, and they decided to retire to their tents for the night. Shortly after that, the noises stopped. In the middle of the night, one of the campers woke up to use the bathroom. As he stepped out of his tent, he heard rustling in the bushes. He shone his flashlight in the direction of the noise and saw a pair of yellow glowing eyes staring back at him. The man froze in fear. Suddenly, the creature lunged forward and attacked the camper. The rest of the group woke up to the sound of the camper's cries for help and rushed out of their tents. They could see what looked like a clown attacking their friend. It was, in fact, just that. A man dressed in a creepy clown-like costume, wielding a large knife. One of the campers ran as fast as she could to a camp about half a mile away that they had passed on the way to theirs, while the other 2 jumped on the clown to try and stop the savage attack, only to seal their own fate. The clown was too strong and too determined. One by one, the campers fell victim to the clown's knife. The camper that went for help made it to the other camp, and she was in luck as they had service on their cell phone. She called the police. By the time the police arrived, all that was left at the campsite were the torn and bloody remains of the group and their belongings. The camper that went for help has never been back to the campsite and never been camping since. The authorities searched the woods for the killer, but they never found the clown. To this day, the true identity of the killer remains a mystery, and the case is still open. The remote campsite where the group lost their lives is said to be haunted by their spirits. The incident has become a cautionary tale for those who dare to venture into the California woods, and it remains one of the most terrifying camping stories I've heard. Story number 2. A couple decided to go on a camping trip near a creek in Northern California. They were excited to get away from the hustle and bustle of city life and spend some time in nature. They packed all their gear and set off on their journey. After a short drive and 2-hour hike, they reached the campsite. They set up their tent, started a fire, and cooked some dinner. The night was peaceful, with the sound of the leaves rustling in the breeze and the moon shining off the creek. This was exactly what the couple was looking for. They sat around the fire, just enjoying nature's charm. After a while, they settled into their tent for a good night's sleep. Shortly after settling into bed, they heard something scratching at the side of their tent. They both froze, wondering what it could be. The man yelled, "Hey, go on now," thinking that would scare whatever animal that was exploring their camp off. The scratching stopped. Then they heard a voice. It was a woman's voice, softly whispering, "Let me in." The couple was terrified. They couldn't see anyone outside their tent, but the voice continued to whisper, "Let me in." The man went outside to see who was messing with them. There was no one anywhere around their tent, or campsite for that matter. Shortly after returning to the tent, the whispering continued. They decided to ignore the voice and huddled together in the middle of the tent, listening as the voice continued to plead with them to let her in. Eventually, the voice stopped. Needless to say, there was no sleep that night. The next morning, they packed up camp and left as quickly as possible. As they were hiking back to their truck, neither of them were prepared for what they would soon find. About an hour into the hike, they saw a woman's body laying on the ground just off the trail. The brush had hidden the body from view on the way in. It was clear that she had been dead for quite some time. They reported the body to the authorities, and an investigation was launched. It was discovered that the woman had been missing for several weeks and likely died of exposure. The couple believes that the voice they heard the night before was that of the woman's ghost begging for help. The couple was traumatized by the experience and never went camping again. They still talk about the terrifying night, just in the comfort of their own home. Story number 3. The story takes place in the fall, when a couple of friends went hunting in the remote wilderness of Northern California. They arrived midday and set up camp in a beautiful clearing surrounded by tall trees with a small pond nearby. The next day of their trip was peaceful and uneventful, and they hiked and just enjoyed the tranquility of their surroundings. In the middle of the second night, they were awakened by the sound of heavy footsteps outside their tent. At first, they thought it might be a bear or some other wild animal, but the footsteps sounded too deliberate and human-like. They lay still in their tent, hoping whatever was outside would go away. Suddenly, they heard what sounded like something large rolling around on the ground. It was only feet from their tent. The hunters were terrified, but they tried to remain calm, as they knew there was some logical explanation for the sounds. The ruckus continued for a few more minutes. Then it sounded like something heavy fell. Then the sound of gurgling. Then it was quiet. The men took this opportunity to get to the safety of their truck. They drove away from the area and returned the next morning to retrieve their camp. They found no evidence of anything that could be attributed to the sounds they heard. When they got back to civilization, they reported the incident to local authorities. It turns out this was the 4th report of this kind in that area. Some believe that the noises are from the ghosts of a man and a bear, as some years ago, a bear was found dead with a large knife sticking out of its neck only yards from a mangled corpse of a missing hiker. Was it the ghosts of the man and bear fighting? Or was it something more alive and sinister? We may never know. Story number 4. This story is about a group of hunters who set out to explore a new hunting area in Northern California. They were a group of experienced hunters, and they had all the necessary gear and equipment for a successful hunting trip. As they trekked deeper into the woods, they noticed the atmosphere around them had changed. The forest was dead silent. Despite this, they continued on their hunt. As night fell, the hunters set up their camp and settled in for the night. However, their peaceful rest was abruptly interrupted when they heard something moving through the trees, and it was getting closer and closer to their camp. The hunters struggled to get dressed and get out of their tents to confront whatever was coming towards them. Suddenly, a terrifying creature burst through the trees and attacked one of the hunters. It was a large, hairy beast with razor-sharp claws. The hunters quickly realized that they were being hunted themselves. They frantically tried to defend themselves against the creature, but it was too fast and too powerful. One by one, the hunters were picked off, and their screams echoed through the forest. 3 lay dead, ripped apart. 2 of the group managed to escape, but they were haunted by the memory of the terrifying beast that they had encountered in the wilderness. When authorities recovered the bodies, it was determined to be a bear attack. To this day, there are stories of a monster bear that lurks in the forest of Northern California, waiting to prey on unsuspecting hunters who dare to venture too deep into its territory. Thanks for watching till the end. If these stories gave you chills, check out the next video, as those stories are positively spine-tingling.